Did you know that most of your unhappiness comes from the conversations you have with yourself? That nonstop voice, judging, comparing, and creating fear. What if I told you that by stopping to feed this mental chatter, your financial and spiritual life could change completely? By silencing this voice, you open yourself to true prosperity and discover an inner peace you didn't even know existed. The root of unhappiness often isn't in the circumstances we face, but in the way we interpret those situations. Our thoughts shape the reality we perceive and often create a distortion that pulls us away from inner peace. By diving into constant self-criticism and worry, we disconnect from the present, hindering the blossoming of spirituality and true prosperity. It's as if a fog hangs over our prosperous life, clouding the clarity and serenity we seek. Most people don't even realize there's a constant internal voice creating scenarios of fear and judgment. This mental noise is what most blocks self-knowledge and the ability to elevate our spiritual vibration. Many believe this voice represents who they truly are, thus trapping their financial, emotional, and even spiritual lives within limitations imposed by the mind. Each negative thought feeds a chain of self-sabotage, pushing away the prosperity we wish to achieve. Thinking about a situation repeatedly doesn't bring solutions, only more unhappiness. Imagine someone who, after missing a job opportunity, spends days brooding, believing that this setback defines what they deserve. This thought cycle is what traps so many people in a life of unfulfillment. Prosperity and peace begin when we realize we don't have to stay trapped in these narratives and choose to see beyond the mental noise that distances us from happiness. Self-knowledge starts to unfold when we become aware that our thoughts are not the absolute reality but rather interpretations of it. Spirituality teaches us that it's possible to observe thoughts without becoming enslaved by them. When we manage to step back and observe our mind in action, we open space for inner peace. This not only transforms our financial life but also our spiritual vibration, bringing a prosperous life. Understanding this dynamic isn't something that happens overnight. The daily practice of being present and observing thoughts can be challenging, but it is extremely rewarding. Imagine someone who, instead of reacting with anxiety upon seeing their monthly bills, chooses to observe the worry arise without identifying with it. This simple shift in perception creates a direct impact on financial life and brings more clarity for making better decisions. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to keep receiving content that will take you to a new level of awareness. When it comes to prosperity and self-knowledge, thoughts are a powerful tool when used consciously. The first step is to recognize that we often create imaginary scenarios of failure that have no basis in reality. Instead of thinking the worst, we can train our minds to focus on possibilities. For instance, when facing a challenge at work, instead of thinking, "I won't succeed," we can reframe it to, "This is an opportunity for growth," thereby elevating our vibration and drawing closer to a more prosperous life. Unhappiness arises when we cling to these internal voices that create suffering. The mind is like an instrument. It can be used to create harmony or disorder, and when misused, it pulls us away from our spiritual path. This constant self-sabotage generates a state of continuous alertness, which is highly draining. To achieve a fulfilling and prosperous life, we need to understand that the path to true peace starts within us, in the control we have over our thoughts. The ability to prosper is not limited to what we do in the external world, but also to what we cultivate internally. When the mind is in constant noise, spirituality is lost, and financial life tends to suffer as well. But when we take control of our thoughts, we realize we can shape a much more abundant reality. This is where prosperity and spirituality begin to unite, creating a virtuous cycle in our lives. People who can observe and control their thoughts find it easier to handle adversity and discover clearer paths to living a prosperous life. What many don't realize is that by cultivating self-knowledge and inner peace, our vibration naturally rises, impacting all areas of life. This is the secret of many successful people. It's not just about hard work, but about mastering one's own thinking. As we become more aware of the power of thought, we start to see how this mental process directly impacts our external reality. The prosperous life we so desire is not just the result of action, but also of a positive mental state. Thus, the key to a balanced financial and spiritually rich life lies in how we nurture our mind and spirit daily. This creates an elevated vibration that attracts more prosperity. The mind, when uncontrolled, creates a distorted image of who we are. Often, it projects a self based on fears, insecurities, and limiting beliefs, leading us to live a life of suffering and disconnection. This false self that the mind builds prevents us from achieving true prosperity, as it blocks the path to self-knowledge and spirituality. Believing in this self, fabricated by the mind, leads us to live a distorted reality where financial and emotional life becomes hostage to a cycle of fear. When we let the mind control everything, we become prisoners of this mental construct. It's like an invisible prison where everything we see is filtered through our beliefs. This false self generates thoughts like, "I'm not capable," "I'll never succeed," or "I don't deserve prosperity," creating barriers that keep us from a prosperous life. Over time, these beliefs end up shaping how we relate to life, affecting our spiritual vibration and even our finances. The mind, when misused, can be as destructive as uncontrolled cell growth in the body. Like a disease, it consumes our vitality, leading us to a life of dissatisfaction and suffering. The false self feeds on comparisons, envy, and judgments, distancing us from our true essence. This incessant cycle of negative thoughts impacts not only our emotional life but also our financial life, blocking the prosperity that could naturally flow. When we are trapped in the false self, we live in a constant state of scarcity. We feel we never have enough, that we're never good enough, and this creates an inner void that's hard to fill. This sense of lack keeps us away from inner peace and spirituality, maintaining us in a state of low vibration. True prosperity emerges when we start questioning these beliefs and stop identifying with the false self created by the mind. Fear is one of the greatest weapons of the false self. It makes us believe that the unknown is dangerous and that it's better to cling to what we already know, even if it brings us unhappiness. This fear of risk, of stepping out of our comfort zone, is what prevents many from achieving financial prosperity. For example, think of someone who avoids investing in a new project out of fear of failure. The false self creates barriers that seem insurmountable but are actually illusions. When we start identifying this false self, we realize it's fed by automatic and involuntary thoughts. It grows stronger each time we react to these thoughts without questioning them. The key to escaping this prison is to start observing these patterns and understanding they don't define us. By doing so, we begin to open space for a new way of being, a higher vibration that connects us with prosperity and spirituality. The mind, when untrained, makes us believe we are only this set of thoughts and fears. But just like an actor on stage, we can choose to play a different role. We can set aside this false self and start living a more authentic life guided by our true being. This transformation process can have a profound impact on all areas of our life, including financial life, where we begin to make decisions with more clarity and confidence. Spirituality teaches us that we are much more than this mental construct. We are beings of pure consciousness, connected to something much greater. When we remember this, the false self loses its power. We begin to live in a state of presence, no longer controlled by the fears and insecurities of the mind. This state of being leads us to a more prosperous life, where abundance flows more easily, both spiritually and financially. The false self feeds on comparisons and judgments. It makes us look at other people's lives and feel that we are falling behind, creating a cycle of unhappiness. But when we stop identifying with this internal voice, we begin to see life differently. We start celebrating others' success and, thus, elevate our vibration, attracting more prosperity into our own lives. Self-knowledge is the key to this transformation. For many, awakening from this false self is the first step toward enlightenment. The mind can no longer control us when we realize it is just a tool, not who we truly are. This understanding frees us from the cycle of suffering and creates space for true peace. As we detach from this mental construct, we begin to live a more authentic and fulfilling life. Prosperity and spirituality become the foundation of a new way of living. Many people live in a state of constant involuntary thinking, not realizing they are controlled by it. This means that many decisions and reactions are the result of automatic judgments based on past experiences or future fears. This incessant flow of thoughts distances us from the present, moving us away from a prosperous and spiritually balanced life. Without this awareness, our spiritual vibration is compromised, preventing us from achieving prosperity and self-knowledge. Involuntary thinking acts as a filter that distorts how we perceive the world around us. Imagine someone who, upon entering a business meeting, immediately starts comparing themselves with others present, feeling inferior. This automatic judgment doesn't reflect reality, but rather old beliefs that continue to influence the present. These thoughts block financial growth and weaken our vibration, distancing us from true prosperity. Involuntary thinking is like background music that plays non-stop, often without us even noticing. This music can be composed of self-criticism, fears, or comparisons that keep us trapped in a cycle of suffering. To live a prosperous and spiritually rich life, it's essential to free ourselves from this mental soundtrack that prevents us from living in the present. When we liberate ourselves from this incessant thinking, our financial, emotional, and spiritual lives begin to flourish. One of the most common forms of involuntary thinking is constant judgment. We judge ourselves, others, and situations without even realizing it. Each judgment we make is a missed opportunity to be truly present and at peace. Spirituality teaches us that by observing these judgments without attaching to them, we begin to cultivate a more prosperous life. Imagine someone who, instead of judging their financial situation, chooses to see what can be done to improve it. This shift in mindset opens doors to new opportunities. When involuntary thinking dominates, we lose connection with the present moment, and that's often when poor financial decisions are made. People tend to act impulsively, driven by fear or anxiety. But by becoming aware of our automatic actions, we can start to interrupt this pattern. This has a direct impact on financial life, as we begin to make more conscious decisions that bring us closer to a prosperous and spiritually aligned life. A powerful practice for dealing with involuntary thinking is meditation. By meditating, we create a space between ourselves and our thoughts, allowing us to observe the mental flow without getting involved in it. Imagine the mind as a sky full of clouds. Thoughts are the passing clouds, and our true essence is the clear and calm sky behind them. The more time we spend observing these clouds without reacting, the more we can elevate our vibration and attract prosperity. Most involuntary thoughts have deep roots in past experiences. Many people remain trapped in what has happened or fear what might happen. This creates a state of constant worry, draining our energy and moving us away from true prosperity. To break this cycle, it is necessary to bring attention to the present and question each thought that arises. This generates a transformation in both financial life and our spiritual state. When we stop being controlled by automatic thoughts, we begin to regain control of our own lives. Imagine someone who, instead of being dominated by anxiety about the future, chooses to focus on what can be done in the present. This focus brings clarity to both spiritual issues and financial life. When we live in the present, we can make more accurate decisions and connect with an abundance vibration that attracts prosperity. Involuntary thinking, besides distancing us from the present, also makes us create an unrealistic image of the future. Often, this image is filled with fear and worry, preventing us from living a prosperous life. The key to breaking this cycle is to realize that the future does not yet exist and that the only moment we can act is now. This understanding brings a deep inner peace, and with it, a higher vibration that connects us with true spiritual prosperity. By starting to notice the presence of involuntary thinking, we take the first step toward freeing ourselves from it. It's not an easy task, but with practice and patience, it is possible. Each time we manage to observe a thought without getting carried away by it, we strengthen our connection with the present. This, in turn, paves the way for a more stable financial life and a deeper spiritual connection. Prosperity begins to manifest when the mind calms down and we allow ourselves to be truly present. True liberation begins when we realize that we are not our thoughts. When we can observe the mental flow without identifying with it, we open the door to a new consciousness. This higher awareness connects us with the essence of our being, where qualities like love, peace, and prosperity naturally reside. Often, the mind acts as a prison, but when we realize that it is just a tool, we begin to free ourselves and live more fully. Observing thoughts is a powerful but challenging exercise. The mind is skilled at drawing us into its stories and dramas. However, when we develop the practice of observing the thinker within us, we take a step toward true freedom. This freedom is not just mental but spiritual. As we detach from automatic thoughts, our spiritual vibration rises, allowing prosperity to flow more easily in all areas of life, including financial life. Liberation of the mind is directly linked to self-knowledge. When we stop identifying with thoughts, we begin to know our true self. This process is liberating because it detaches us from the expectations and judgments that once imprisoned us. Imagine someone who, instead of seeing themselves as undeserving of a prosperous life, begins to recognize themselves as capable of achieving spiritual and material prosperity. This simple act of observing the mind without judgment opens pathways to transformation. This process of liberation can start with small steps, such as setting aside a few minutes each day to simply observe what passes through the mind without reacting. By doing this, we train our consciousness to perceive what is truly important. What once seemed like mental chaos begins to calm, revealing an inner peace that has always been there, hidden by the noise of thoughts. This state of presence brings us closer to prosperity, as both our financial and spiritual lives benefit from the clarity that arises from this practice. One of the main benefits of freeing the mind is the ability to see life with greater clarity and wisdom. When we detach from the stories created by the mind, we begin to live more authentically and consciously. For example, someone who used to fear investing due to limiting beliefs can now assess financial opportunities with a clearer and less fear-driven perspective. Mental liberation transforms the way we view the world and handle our finances. As we free ourselves from the mind, we access a deeper dimension of ourselves. This dimension, often described as pure consciousness, is where our true essence resides. In this state, we realize that prosperous life is not only related to material accumulation but to an internal sense of peace and abundance. By stopping the incessant flow of thoughts, we connect with this internal source of spirituality, which in turn nourishes all areas of our life. When we liberate ourselves from automatic thoughts, we gain the ability to respond to life more consciously rather than simply reacting. This means that decisions previously made based on fear or anxiety are now made with clarity and confidence. In financial life, this can mean the end of impulsive habits and the building of a more solid foundation for the future. The self-knowledge that arises from this liberation allows us to see opportunities more realistically and less influenced by the mind's limitations. This liberation does not mean the end of thoughts, but rather our ability not to be dominated by them. Thoughts will continue to arise, but instead of clinging to them, we can simply let them pass like clouds in the sky. When this happens, we experience an inner peace that transcends the mind, connecting us to a higher spiritual vibration. And it is from this deep connection with the self that true prosperity emerges, impacting both our spiritual and financial lives. Love is one of the qualities that naturally emerge when we free ourselves from the mind. When we stop identifying with thoughts, we create space for unconditional love, both for ourselves and others. This shift in perspective profoundly transforms our relationships, choices, and our view of life. In financial matters, this openness to love can translate into more generosity, trust, and collaboration, essential elements for creating a prosperous life. As we observe our thoughts and free ourselves from the mind, we begin to realize that true peace cannot be found in the external world but rather within ourselves. This inner peace strengthens us in the face of life's challenges and allows us to confront adversities with greater serenity. The mind may attempt to pull us away from this state of presence, but the more we practice conscious observation, the more we connect with spirituality and our financial life flourishes, reflecting this internal balance. As we continue in this process, there arises a need to deepen this practice further, leading us to explore the power of presence not only as a tool for liberation but as a natural state of being. Practicing presence is one of the most transformative paths for those seeking a prosperous and spiritually fulfilling life. When we focus on the present moment, we let go of worries about the past or future, allowing us to access a new dimension of peace and clarity. The practice of presence reconnects us with our essence and helps us realize that true prosperity is in the now. Thus, we begin to make more conscious decisions, whether regarding financial matters or our relationships. Observing thoughts without judgment is a powerful way to practice presence. By doing so, we create a mental space, a pause between what we feel and how we react. This practice, though seemingly simple, can deeply transform how we relate to the world. Imagine, for example, someone who, instead of reacting impulsively to a financial challenge, chooses to take a deep breath and focus on the present. This simple act of presence can bring a clearer and more effective solution, paving the way for a prosperous life. When we are present, even the simplest daily tasks can become moments of spiritual connection. Something as mundane as washing dishes or walking around the neighborhood can be transformed into an opportunity to practice being present. By doing so, we raise our spiritual vibration, which directly impacts our prosperity. For instance, financial life benefits from this practice because living in the present helps us make more considered decisions and avoid impulsive actions that could harm us. The practice of presence helps us break free from the mental narratives we have built over time. Often, the mind traps us in cycles of self-criticism and fear, preventing us from living fully. However, by focusing on the present, we interrupt these cycles and create space for inner peace to flourish. By cultivating this state of awareness, we experience a greater spiritual connection and realize that prosperity is not in a distant future but available in every moment. Focusing on the present moment is also an act of self-knowledge. When we are truly present, we begin to understand our desires, fears, and behavior patterns more clearly. This helps us make decisions more aligned with who we really are. Imagine someone who, upon realizing their financial habits, decides to change how they spend and invest, opting for choices that are more conscious and aligned with a prosperous life. Practicing presence is a tool that empowers us to transform every aspect of our lives. The practice of presence is a way to calm the mind and create space for clarity. When our mind is filled with thoughts, it's hard to see the opportunities around us. But by practicing presence, we begin to see more clearly and make decisions that lead to a more balanced financial and spiritual life. This state of mindfulness connects us with our true essence, where prosperity already exists in potential, waiting to manifest. Being present is not just a mental practice but also a physical and emotional one. When we direct our attention to the current moment, we become more aware of our body, emotions, and surroundings. This integral connection helps us make wiser and more balanced decisions. For example, a person who practices presence when making financial decisions will have more clarity and discernment, avoiding pitfalls or impulses that could compromise their prosperity. Presence helps us free ourselves from the illusion that happiness and prosperity are always in a distant place or hypothetical future. Instead of living in anticipation of something that will make us feel good, we come to realize that true well-being is here and now. This shift in perspective allows us to live more prosperously, both spiritually and materially. When we understand that everything we need is already present, we open ourselves to a more balanced and prosperous financial life. Practicing presence also teaches us to accept what is happening in the moment without resistance. Often, the mind resists situations we deem negative, causing suffering. However, by being present, we learn to accept things as they are without trying to control or change them. This acceptance brings us inner peace and helps us live more fluidly and prosperously. Thus, we begin to attract more abundance into our lives, both spiritually and financially. With continuous practice of presence, we begin to experience brief moments of stillness, where the incessant flow of thoughts gives way to profound calm. These moments, however brief, show us that inner peace is possible and within reach. As we experience more such moments, our spiritual vibration rises and prosperity manifests more naturally. This is the power of presence, connecting with the now and, from there, transforming our reality. The mind, when incessant, can become a burden, creating noise and agitation. But as we learn to calm it, we find a state of pure consciousness where peace and prosperity begin to blossom. This mental calm is not something to be sought externally but something we cultivate internally. Many believe that the silence of the mind can only be achieved through complex practices, but in reality, It begins with simple acts of attention and presence. The more we distance ourselves from mental agitation, the clearer our spiritual and financial lives become. Calming the mind is, in fact, the starting point for a prosperous life in every sense. When the mind is at peace, we can see the opportunities around us more clearly, especially regarding our financial life. Imagine the difference between making an investment decision in a state of anxiety and mental confusion versus doing so with calm and clarity. The second scenario is likely to lead to success. This mental calm is a gift we can give ourselves every day, through meditation practice or simply by being present in what we do. Practicing mindfulness is an excellent way to calm the mind. By focusing on a single task or even our breath, we step out of mental chaos. These simple practices, such as taking deep breaths for a few minutes or observing our surroundings without judgment, can transform our internal state. What once seemed like a storm of thoughts now becomes a gentle breeze. This serenity not only improves our spiritual quality of life, but also helps us make better decisions in financial matters. Letting go of the mind's incessant chatter is crucial for experiencing pure consciousness. However, this detachment does not mean ignoring thoughts, but rather observing without engaging. When we practice this detachment, we begin to perceive a clarity that was previously unavailable. This clarity is a powerful key to prosperity because it allows us to act more wisely and strategically. Both spiritually and financially, this practice helps us find balance and harmony. Often, mental noise makes us believe that we have to resolve everything at once. But by calming the mind, we realize that we can take one step at a time. There is no need for haste. Calmness teaches us to trust the process of life and to let things unfold in their own time. In the context of financial life, this may mean waiting for the right moment for an investment or making more thoughtful decisions. Prosperity comes to those who can maintain serenity even amid chaos. A tranquil mind is a creative mind. When we calm our thoughts, we open space for new ideas and insights. These moments of inspiration often come when we least expect them and can be the catalyst for significant changes, both spiritually and financially. Imagine someone who, by meditating and calming their mind, comes up with an innovative idea for a business or project that completely transforms their financial life. This is the magic that happens when we cultivate inner peace. The practice of calming the mind also has profound effects on our physical well-being. When the mind is at peace, the body follows the same rhythm, allowing vital energy to flow freely. This not only improves our health but also elevates our spiritual vibration. By achieving this state of balance, we realize that true prosperity is not just linked to material wealth but also to health and well-being. A peaceful mind reflects a prosperous life in every sense. Calming the mind allows us to be more present in our daily activities, transforming routine tasks into moments of deep connection. Something simple like preparing a meal or taking a walk can become a spiritual practice when done with mindfulness. This calm connects us with life in a more meaningful way, and this connection directly impacts our prosperity. When we are present and serene, our financial life tends to flow more harmoniously, free from the distractions and confusions generated by a restless mind. This mental serenity, though it may seem difficult to achieve at first, becomes easier with continuous practice. Meditation, for example, is a powerful tool for calming the mind. Setting aside a few minutes each day to simply sit in silence and observe thoughts can make a profound difference. This regular practice not only enhances our spirituality but also prepares us to make more conscious and accurate financial decisions. Prosperity begins with inner calm. As we calm the mind, we discover that what once seemed like a gigantic problem is actually not that significant. Calmness gives us a new perspective on life and the challenges we face. With a serene mind, we approach challenges with more confidence and discernment. This new outlook helps us realize that the prosperous and balanced life we seek is not as distant as we imagined. This journey of mental calm leads us directly to a state of pure consciousness, where peace is constant. The path to enlightenment begins with the liberation from mental constructs, allowing the pure being, free from attachments and expectations, to reveal itself. This state of pure being connects us with the essence of prosperity, as we stop seeking happiness in external factors and begin to find it within. Prosperous living is not about material accumulation but about an awakened mind that understands the simplicity of true wealth. This journey, though it may seem long, begins with small steps of self-knowledge and presence practice. In the process of enlightenment, it is essential to detach from the ego, which keeps us trapped in a constant quest for validation and recognition. By setting aside this need, we begin to live more authentically and freely. Prosperity, both financial and spiritual, naturally arises when we are aligned with our true self, without the interference of the ego. A person seeking enlightenment is not disheartened by fluctuations in financial life because they understand that true wealth lies in the state of being, not in having. Enlightenment brings with it an innocence akin to that of a child who views the world without societal filters. This purity allows us to live with more ease and joy, where worries about the future or attachments to the past dissolve. Upon reaching this state of enlightenment, we become capable of accessing a higher spiritual vibration, which is reflected in our prosperous life. When we let go of material concerns and focus on the present, our financial life adjusts to this new flow of abundance. Detaching from mental constructs does not mean living without responsibilities or ignoring material world issues. On the contrary, when we achieve this state of enlightenment, we begin to make wiser and more balanced decisions. A mind free from ego can see prosperity opportunities that were previously obscured by fear or greed. The path to enlightenment, therefore, does not distance us from financial life but teaches us to handle it in a more conscious and prosperous manner. Enlightenment allows us to live in a state of constant peace, where the agitation of the mind no longer interferes with our actions. This deep calm helps us make more assertive decisions, both spiritually and financially. Imagine someone who, while living in this enlightened state, can handle financial crises with serenity, without being overwhelmed by panic or impulsiveness. This person understands that prosperity is a reflection of their inner state, and by maintaining calm, new opportunities will arise. Detaching from mental attachments leads us to a simpler and more balanced life, where excessive consumption or financial worries are no longer a priority. On the path to enlightenment, we realize that true prosperity is not about accumulating more but about living with less, consciously and fully. This frees us from the need to fill the inner void with material goods, allowing us to live with more lightness and joy. Simplicity, in this sense, is the key to a prosperous and spiritually rich life. The journey to enlightenment is also marked by acceptance. Accepting what is, without trying to change or control circumstances, is one of the greatest steps towards a prosperous life. When we stop resisting reality and begin to flow with it, we start to see that everything we need for an abundant life is already within reach. Enlightenment teaches us to trust in the process of life, and this trust directly reflects in our prosperity, whether spiritual or financial. The state of enlightenment places us in a deep connection with the present moment, where there is no space for worries about the future or regrets about the past. In this state, we live in a continuous flow of peace and abundance, where life unfolds naturally and harmoniously. Financial decisions, for example, are made with clarity and discernment, without the influence of fears or expectations. Enlightenment teaches us that by being present, prosperity flows to us naturally. On the path to enlightenment, we begin to understand that true wealth is in the simplicity of being. There is no need to seek outside what already exists within us. When we reach this state of consciousness, we realize that a prosperous life does not depend on external factors but on our ability to be at peace with what is. An elevated spiritual vibration attracts prosperity, not because we seek it, but because we become an open channel to receive it. This is the essence of a prosperous life, a reflection of our own enlightenment. Enlightenment is a state of pure being, where the ego no longer governs our actions and thoughts. When we live in this state, our spiritual vibration rises, and prosperity becomes a natural consequence of this inner balance. There is no more struggle or effort to achieve abundance because it is already part of our essence. This state of enlightenment connects us directly with the source of life, where everything flows harmoniously and prosperously, both spiritually and financially. This state of pure consciousness is the ultimate goal of this journey. However, as we walk this path, we realize that enlightenment is not the end but the beginning of a new way of living, where prosperity flows naturally in every aspect of our lives. Now that you understand the profound impact of stopping self-talk and how it can transform your life, it's time to take the next step. If you are tired of drowning in worries and expectations that no longer serve you, it is crucial to understand that true prosperity comes from the space we create by releasing what we do not need. Discover how letting go of social masks and limiting patterns can pave the way for a more authentic and spiritually rich life. Click the video on the screen and take the next step towards a more genuine and abundant life. See you there.